Hello. Today I have a pretty special video as I want to tell you the story of how I met RNGesus, looked him deep in the eyes, and he gave me his blessing to create one of the best items to ever be created in Path of Exile. Along with RNGesus' blessing, I likely also got the blessing of the equivalently powerful Chris Wilson, as since I created this item a few days after the launch of Diablo 4, thus I stayed loyal to the true best ARPG. I was rewarded for it. So, how the story goes is that Crucible League is created to make some crazy items. I'm sure this was GGG's vision for it, and thus I wanted to fulfill their vision. In sense, again, Diablo 4 released recently, as of the recording of this video. Thus, the market for trading is extremely limited. Thus, the league is pretty much on life support. I wanted to complete a last final project, so I tried to see which item best would benefit from the Crucible mechanic. So, when trying to determine this, you're basically looking for only one thing, and that is you want an item that has a huge percentage increase on it, so that when you add modifiers to the Crucible, these modifiers are multiplied by this huge percentage. Now, the obvious one has been the Emperor's Vigilance Steel Kite Shield, since I don't think there's any other item that gets to the 1000% number. But Emperor's Vigilance and Spectral Shield Throw have already been done, and I don't really think it's as OP as people say, as I have stated in some previous videos. So, what other items are extremely strong in their baseline, have huge percentage increases on the explicits, and scale very well with Crucible trees? The first thing that I thought of is T0 items. So, when looking for what T0 item I think would be the best for the Crucible mechanic, again, we are looking for a huge percentage increase on the explicit, but also I'm looking for a very unique item that is better than everything else, even baseline. Now, this T0 item may not be the best item in the entire game by default, as it potentially might not be used that frequently because the skill that it would be built for isn't a meta skill. So, given this context, I settled on the Moroi Urhi, as it has a explicit modifier of increased physical damage of 500 to 600, which is extremely high, as not many other items have such high percentage, even outside of the T0 unique category. And also, it fits the niche of being a unique item in that there really isn't any other item in the entire game that has such low attack speed and such high base physical damage. So, since it checks both the categories that I was looking for, this is the item that I chose. And to lean in to the less attack speed and extremely high flat physical damage, I will be building a Shockwave build, as Shockwave is not dependent upon attack speed. And going forward, if GGG creates a cooldown base skill like Frozen Legion that does not worry about attack speed, this item will go on forever to be likely the best item in Path of Exile for such abilities. So the next step is to create a Crucible tree for it. Now, unlucky for me, the Moroi is a two-handed mace, and if you look at the item populations of Crucible trees in the game, maces are one of the lowest because not a lot of people pick up maces, as maces are not meta. This is compared to if I were to choose the Voltaxic Rift, it would be 10 to 100 times easier to create a perfect tree, because since this is a bow league, there are thousands of bows on the market. But I guess I'll do it the hard way, and to show how hard it is, I will show the population of items currently online for the nodes that I wanted. So the first node is the flat physical damage and less attack speed node, and this perfectly synergizes with our build because the Morohi's 600% is multiplying this 14 to 33. So this is effectively 70 to 180 physical damage to the weapon. And again, the less attack speed doesn't matter because since Shockwave is cooldown based, we don't care about attack speed. So, as you can see, to get this mod, there is a single one on the market, so that's not a very good start. And also, it's on the wrong base, as the Moroi has a base of a Karui Mole. So even if I were to purchase this item and split it, I would have to transfer it onto a different base and try to get lucky there. And when I was creating my Moroi, there was actually 0 on the market, so I actually had to purchase a tier 4 mod and run crucibles that had a 10% chance to increase into a tier 5, which, spoiler, did happen. Now let's look at the populations of the other nodes that I want. Another node is the 25% increased cooldown recovery rate, and again, there is very few because there are very few maces on the market, and this is a total of 7 for this modifier. The next one is the 15% increased physical damage modifier, which there is a population of 18 on the market, and I wanted the 30% double damage, which there are 35 on the market. And also, even though there's between 1 and 35 maces on the market with these nodes, they have to be in specific locations for me to more likely create the Crucible tree. So even if there was like 9, there's maybe 3 of those 9 that are in the place where I want them to merge the Crucible tree. But all in all, I, spoiler, did end up creating the Crucible tree, and while I'm pretty good at creating Crucible items, as I've probably made hundreds this league, and that's where I've made probably 90% of my currency, I did get lucky, and I created my 5-node Crucible tree in roughly 7 imprints, as I wasn't counting exactly, but that's roughly how much I used. And I will show that Crucible tree later. So, now that I have a Karui Mole with a perfect Crucible tree, the next process is the not very fun process of chancing. Now, since this is a T0 unique, it is the least likely item to be chanced, but there isn't a lot of information on how hard the chancing process is, as I will get to later. So, going into the chancing process, I didn't want to blow my brains out, so I wanted to take it kind of slow, and my thought process was that since items such as Void Battery and Emperor's Vigilance take roughly 16,000 chance orb to get, and these are classified as T2 uniques, I was thinking that a T1 unique might take double that, so roughly in the 32,000 range, and double that again, you get T0 uniques, thus 64,000. So going into this, I was thinking that 64,000 is a pretty terrible endeavor in terms of fun related, but I was willing to do it since the league is almost over, and I wanted a final project to work on. Thus, I saved up my currency and was able to purchase up to 100,000 chance orbs if it were to take that long, and if I ran out of currency after 100,000 chances, then I would just give up on the project. So, what I did was I set out to chance and scour 10,000 per day until I hit it. Thus, it would take a maximum of 10 days before I called it quits. So, the chancing began. It was not fun, and at the 60,000 mark, I started to question my life decisions, as going into it, again, I thought that at roughly 64,000, I would have the Marohi, and I was already at 60,000 and had nothing to show for all my efforts. So at this point, I got smarter, I guess, and looked into researching, is the chances actually 1 in 64,000? So I got onto YouTube and tried to find a video of someone chancing a T0 unique, and I could not find one. The only video where I saw someone attempting to do so was Slippery Jim, and a few leagues ago, he used 100,000 chance orbs, which is what I was looking to do, to try to get a T0. He was looking to get a Mage Blood, and he failed to do so, which maybe he was unlucky. This didn't 100% discount the 64,000 number that I had in my head, as 100,000 isn't so far off of 64,000 that it would make the 64,000 chance impossible in my brain. But I did a little more digging and came across the Reddit post of someone using 160,000 chance orbs to get a Voltaxic, and this, in my head, somewhat solidified that my 64,000 number might not be super accurate, as if he actually used 164,000 and it's actually a 64,000 chance, in my brain that is too unlucky for it to be actually 64,000. And if you read a little bit lower in the Reddit post, you can see that supposedly he got super lucky by using 160,000 chance orbs, because I guess for some reason someone out there thinks that the chances of chancing a T0 unique is 1 in 940,000, so basically a million. After reading this information at 60,000 chance orbs in, I was a bit confused. This 1 million number seemed astronomically crazy, as no one would ever attempt to chance a T0 if they knew these numbers. And in my head, why would GGG even make it even viable to chance a T0 at such low odds? Because GGG would know that no one would attempt this in the first place anyway. So I took this 1 million number with a grain of salt, as I didn't believe it at the time, and I still don't believe it. But after doing my research, I got back to chancing, and so 60,000 chance orbs in, I was wavering on my decision, but I wanted to see the 100,000 chance orbs through and kept going.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
And lo and behold, this is where the story gets pretty crazy, and I did hit the chance at roughly the 67,000 mark. I do not know the exact number, as throughout the chancing process, I would buy 5,000 chances and 5,000 scours, roughly. So sometimes it would be 4,800, sometimes it would be 5,100, sometimes it would be 4,500, sometimes it would be 5,500. It's just depending on who was on at the time selling the best bulk prices. But it was 67,000, roughly, give or take 2,000 in either direction. But I hit it. So at this point, I was like, I either hit it on the average, which again, going into it was 64,000, and the other guy that got the Voltaxic is super unlucky, and Slippery Jim is a little bit unlucky since he didn't get his Mage Blood at 100,000. Or the 1 million number is super wrong. So if I were to guess the chances of hitting a T0, no, I do not think that I was top 5% in luckiness using the 1 million number, but maybe all things considered, the chances of a unique is 1 in 128,000, maybe. So maybe I got lucky, but the Voltaxic guy got a little bit unlucky. I don't know. That is to be determined. But even if I were the 5% lucky and we are using the 1 million chance number, this isn't the luckiest part of the story, as once I created the Marohi through chancing, I had a little bit of currency left since I didn't have to spend another 150 divines on purchasing 35,000 more chance and scours. So I went to the market and purchased 4 Tempering Orbs, as I wanted to make one of the best items in Path of Exile history. And so Tempering Orbs are an item that can be used on a weapon that gives an item an enchantment of various different types, whether it increases all fire damage modifiers, or cold damage modifiers, or crit modifiers, or speed modifiers. So there is roughly 150 possible outcomes when using a Tempering Orb on a weapon, and I didn't do the specific research, but I think there's roughly a 10% chance to get a physical roll, whether it be a 6% roll, which is most common, an 8% roll, which is extremely rare, or a 15% roll, which we don't want, because the 15% roll also comes with the downsides of increasing attribute requirements or reducing the number of sockets on an item. So what we were looking for is an 8% fizz roll, which is a 1 in 150 chance, or a 6% fizz roll. And this is an expensive process, as this process is really only used for mere tier items, as each Tempering Orb costs roughly 6 to 10 divines, depending on how much are in the market. And as you can see by the number of people online right now, if you look for people that have more than 5 Tempering Orbs, in total, there is roughly 60 Tempering Orbs altogether on the market. So, since I got lucky on the Chance Orbs, I thought I might get lucky on the Tempering Orbs also. But I did not think I was going to one-tap it. So, here's the final reveal of the item that I have made. I did hit in a single Tempering Orb the best modifier that you could possibly hit on this item, and that is 8% increase explicit physical modifier. This is a multiplier on top of the 600% explicit on the item. So, as you can see, the 600 roll is being increased by 23%. This is the combination of the 15% Crucible modifier and the 8% physical Tempering Orb. Since I one-tapped this item using a Tempering Orb, I saved myself roughly 1.5 mirrors, which is pretty good. So I got extremely lucky, potentially, on the chancing outcome. I got unreal lucky on the Tempering Orb. Now, the story of divining this item is the roll range for the physical modifier is pretty large. It's 500 to 600. That means you need 100 divines to get the 600 roll, or 50 divines to get a 599 roll. Originally, again, I didn't have that much currency. I had roughly, 130 divines now after the Tempering Orb slam, and I was sitting on the 3 extra that I didn't need since I one-tapped it. So I really wasn't wasn't willing to spend 100 divines to get the average 600. So I hit it with roughly, I think 3 or 4, and I hit a 595 roll. And I was going to stop there because, I mean, that's a 1 in 20 chance to divine it. But I'm kind of looking at an item that is worth, depending on what numbers you use on the percentage chance of the chance orbs, you are looking at a 10 mirror plus item. So maybe I should spend a few more divines. So not satisfied with a 595 roll, I hit it with I think 2 or 3 more, and I got a 599 roll. So again, it's lucky, but not as lucky as the others. But I used 6 or 7 divines to get a 1 in 50 roll for the 599, and at this point I kind of ran out of currency because I wanted to showcase this build, and since my character was naked, I still had to buy some gear, and so even though this item technically isn't perfect, it's not 600, I actually don't have the currency even now to get the 600 roll. So maybe a little later I'll go for the 600 roll, but for now I'll stick with 599. So to show how good this item is compared to other items, you can see that the top end damage of this item is pretty nuts. 1091 to 1741. How does this compare to other Marohis and or other mirror tier items? Searching on trade, what is basically the best Marohi that you can get with a non-crucible item? As you can see, a 598 roll with 20 quality gives you 800 to 1200. So this is an average hit of 1000, whereas my Marohi has an average hit of 1416. So with the Tempering Orb and the Crucible Tree, I increased the damage of the Marohi through just the physical modifiers by roughly 40%. But again, this does not account for all the modifiers that actually don't have a downside. So with the physical modifiers increasing our damage by 40%, our double damage 30%, and our cooldown recovery rate 25% damage, our Marohi is roughly 100% better than a perfect non-crucible Marohi, which is pretty good since doubling the output power of a T0 unique seems decent, but also you can see that I did get a 5th node on the tree, which I wasn't even going to try for, but I guess I got randomly when merging my trees, as when attempting to go for my 4th node, this came along with it, so I was like, okay, I guess I'll keep it. And that is my Frozen Legion, which is another skill that does not worry about attack speed at all, as it is only cooldown based. My Frozen Legion has a 100% increased cooldown recovery rate, but with a downside of doing 30% less damage. And as you can see in game, you can see that I can spawn 6 clones every 1.8 seconds. So that's my story behind the creation of the best top-end weapon to ever exist in Path of Exile history, and hopefully GGG comes out with new skills that are not attack speed based and are cooldown based, as this item will continue to be the best item in the entire game's history, as I don't foresee GGG creating a system in which you can make items as OP as Crucible League delivered us. So that's my story. If you have any comments or questions, put them in the comments and I'll get to them. Thanks.